I'm tired of being the invisible man. The invisible man. Oh, the invisible man.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Invisible Man. Today we have the wonderful Jeff Patch joining us. Going to find out a bit about him and his band Free to Grow. So, hi, Jeff.
Hello.
So, Ryan, you want to introduce me and you?
How you guys doing out there?
Let's do our
Everyone
introductions.
staying healthy?
Yep. Introductions, Ryan.
Alrighty. Well, my name, or that handsome young man who was just doing our introductions there, is Mark David Stollard. He uses his middle name even though he doesn't have to.
And this guy next to me here is Ryan Jans. His middle name is also David, but he doesn't use it even though he should. And we are It's All in the Mind.
It's all in the mind. Hey, we're getting better at that.
Getting better, yeah, the
man.
delay is less noticeable. Just getting it out of the way.
Good.
Right, so let's get straight to Jeff there. I got a introduction written here. So today's guest is Jeff Patch, leader of the band Free to Grow. Free to Grow is a band from Fredericton, New Brunswick, and is self-described as a mix of folk rock, progressive, and East Coast in a classic rock blender. They first performed together in 2014, followed closely by their self-titled debut album. They were the winner of the Stingray Rising Star at the 25th annual Fredericton, why am I having trouble saying that? Harvest Jazz and Blues Festival in 2015. Their debut album was ranked one of the top 10 New Brunswick releases in 2014. And a music journalist and Polaris Prize juror Adam Bowie described them as a cool debut album from a local band that holds Pink Floyd and Jethro Tull in equally high regards. High praise indeed. So, Jeff, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us.
I'm good, and my name is Jeffrey Robert Patch. Just to let you know that I have a middle name.
Okay.
So I'm doing great. I'm isolating like the rest of the world, but I can see out the window, and today it happens to be sunny. And people are walking down the street and walking their dogs, and it looks good.
Yeah, here in Winnipeg,
but it really isn't.
Yeah. Here in Winnipeg, it was it's bloody cold and snow everywhere. It snowed again for us this week. So
yep.
Just when we
it
thought
is
we were
clear. It is bright blue and clear and cold outside right now.
Well, I wouldn't expect anything except cold and snow in Winnipeg, except perhaps floods.
Yep.
Well, hold on to your butts, folks, because that's definitely a possibility. With that extra bit of snow, and I think just south of us in Grand Forks has had quite a bit of snow, and whatever they have, we usually get. So that's a definite possibility.
Yeah, we've had some bad flood years around here two of the last 3 years. So, people are hoping we don't have that on top of everything else.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that would be the very last thing that we would want. That's for sure. Or need.
Okay, enough of the small talk. Well, I want to find out about you, Jeff. Can you maybe introduce yourself to the audience?
Well, I'm Jeff, and I'm the leader of the band Free to Grow. I formed the band with some friends because I wanted a vehicle to both perform and record songs that I had written for 40 years or more. I had started playing music when I was in my teens. I grew up on classic rock, and then I put music to the side as a hobby and pursued a career in natural resource management for quite a few decades. And then I retired early at age 55, so I was lucky to be able to do that, and got the band together, Free to Grow.
So you're on a mission from God? Was that the implication?
You beat me to it, man.
A mission from somewhere. Yes.
So
But my older siblings, my oldest brother had gone to see the Beatles in their last tour in '66, and the first concert I went to was the Stones in their 1972 tour. And so I grew up listening to and trying to go to concerts, and I was lucky enough to see. I grew up west of Montreal, so that was different. I was close enough to the city to be able to go into town and see major concerts, but lived in the suburbs, so didn't have to live, the full urban lifestyle, fortunately. And so I saw people like Eric Clapton and Led Zeppelin and other major acts back in the 1970s. And then I moved to New Brunswick and went to university, and I ended up getting a job on graduation and stayed more or less in Fredericton since then. And I did live in some other parts of New Brunswick, but I've settled down in outside Fredericton, and it's a lovely spot.
Yeah. So
Excellent.
so
Hold
you-
on
so
a
you-
sec there, Mark. We've actually got some people joining us here live on our stream here on Facebook. Riel Gervais, a good friend of mine, so friends of some, is joining us. Catherine, our girl from Mark's original side of the pond, has joined us. Thank you, Catherine, for being a loyal fan this whole time. Jessica Olfert and Caitlin Elizabeth all have joined us here today. Welcome, everybody, to the show.
And
If you have any questions for Jeff as we're going along, feel free to put them in the comments, and if we see them, we'll definitely put them on for you.
And Beverly McKean has joined us on Facebook. So hi, Beverly.
Hi, everybody.
So this is good. We've got a whole. There's people joining us. Sometimes it's you feel like there's no one there, but it's nice to have some names. So Jeff, you obviously I've seen your videos, and I know a little bit about you. You play guitar. How long have you been playing?
I started when I was about 15 years old, so I've been playing over 40 years. And as I mentioned to you earlier, that doesn't mean I'm any good, but I have been playing for a long time.
Self-taught?
Yes.
You didn't have any lessons?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think that's how.
No, I had piano lessons when I was a kid, and I had them up until I was 10 years old, and we moved. And I must have been so bad because my father didn't want to move the piano with us. So the piano lessons had to stop. And beyond that, it's self-taught.
Yeah. Do you play any other instruments, or are you just focused on the guitar?
Well, I play just about anything.
Okay.
Again, not necessarily well, but on different songs, I've played mandolin and Irish bouzouki. There are a few songs we have that feature that. I play some bamboo flutes and so on. Jethro Tull is a big influence. I saw them 4 times back in their heyday in the 70s.
Oh, nice.
And, I'll tinker around on keys, but I'm pretty rubbish on that, as you would say from where you're from.
No.
But, yeah, no, it's, whatever there is. And I don't know if you can see around. Oh, yeah, I gotta go around the music. You can see all kinds of instruments from lap steel to 12-string guitars to several electric guitars.
Then, do I see an invasion back there?
We'll swing over here. There's kind of a rack of a couple different keyboards. So yeah. There's all kinds of things that I try and play.
Was that an invasion I saw? I saw the round back.
What did you see?
Was that an invasion? I saw a guitar with a round
Yes,
back.
yes.
Yeah, I'm
yes,
an invasion guy.
I have a couple of ovations, 1 6-string and 1 12-string.
Oh, yeah, I have an Elite T that I use on stage, and then I've got an Applause, which is their low end, which I love playing.
Well, one of the things, and I think it shows in some of the songs, but one of the things is that I also like to use a number of different tunings. And like a dadgad tuning and open C minor and some other tunings. And I find that that's not only helpful to give ideas with songwriting, because to me, songwriting starts with some kind of a riff or a chord. And those instruments in different tuning provide different voicings, which can, to me, stimulate creativity. And so often, well, always when we play on stage, I usually have a rack of instruments behind me, and you know, I've grown to where I can use a wireless jack, and so I'll be plugging in maybe 2 or 3 different acoustic guitars that are in alternate tunings, or the bouzouki, or the mandolin, or some other things, and that helps with things, because you don't like to watch people retune in the middle of a show. So
no, yeah, it was actually. Yeah, I was actually at a show. I was actually performing on a show, and one of the guys opening. This was about a year ago. A brilliant guitarist, but he seemed to spend 5 minutes between songs. Kind of killed the energy.
yes, yes.
So anyway.
Yeah, you got to be careful with that. When Mark and I were playing full time all the time, I had another project going, and it was a heavy metal band, and obviously we had some very odd tunings, a lot of progressive rock, and not too far off some of the influences that you guys had. And I ended up having to get a 5-string. I borrowed a 5-string bass for a long time, and then I ended up buying a 6-string bass. But you know, you do have to be careful. Unless you're actually going out of tune, you probably should just have multiple guitars that are tuned to the different variations, because it is very difficult to have like a real upbeat and everyone's in, the crowd's into it and knows, all right, great, we're gonna go to this next song. Hold on, almost there. Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's just that's too much of a gear change. So.
Then again, sometimes it's really nice, as opposed to a full show with 3 sets and that kind of thing, to go with one guitar and one tuning and do all the show, just bang, bang, a quick set, and not go through all that BS of changing instruments. But anyway.
Yeah. Actually, for our CD release, I had my upright bass there. Did I have the 6? No, I don't think I had the 6-string then. Did I, Mark? No, I just the white one. I think
the white one.
Yeah, so I had 2 on stage, and of course the stage that we were playing on was tiny. So by the time we got the drum set and Mark and myself and my basses on stage, there was barely any room to do anything.
Yeah, I think that you were taking as much room as a drummer.
So I've got to ask you, as a bassist, do you get as much as abuse as we try and heap on our bassist? You know, with all the bass jokes about, you know, bass solos or
Well, I've heard them all, and I kind of just roll my eyes.
Yeah.
And then I'll try and give a couple of good jabs. Mark and I have always had a really good collaborative relationship, so I don't get a whole lot of flack from Mark, but I did get it in the other bands. Yeah. But then when I started doing like harmony songs and background vocals and stuff, they were like, oh well, we'll just leave them alone.
Actually, I think Ryan
in our case, it's all in good fun. Our
bassist for sure, yeah,
is super talented, and we're happy to have him. But it's always fun whenever these memes come up, and they seem to happen with bass memes more than other band members. Then we're sure to pass them on. So probably like you, he's seen it all and just rolls his eyes and say, "Ha ha." Every once in a while, he'll say, "That's a good one."
Yeah. There's the odd one that doesn't come in. The one that I always get was drummers. For a while, do you remember that Rob Reiner made a mockumentary called "This Is Spinal Tap," and they just kept having drummers disappear out of the band, and that was like us for the longest time. Mark and I we would have people filter in and out of the band, drummers coming in and out of the band all the time. And so when we did get a drummer, and he would start giving us a little sass, and be like, well, how can you tell a drummer's at your door that the knock keeps speeding up and slowing down, speeding up and slowing down. So like I said, we can give as much as we can give, right?
Well, yeah.
We've had several drummers in our lifetime, and but you know, we've also had people, Fredericton being, among other things, a university town, and not wanting to be an old dad band with just me and my types in there. Everybody else in the band is younger, and so we've had some band members in the past who have been university students, and they are with us for a few years, and then they graduate and move somewhere else in the country. And we had a bassist move to Montreal and a drummer move to Toronto, to further their careers and go on with their lives. And we're lucky enough that we found replacements. And, our current lineup has been in place for well over a year and a half now, I'd say. And, we're all good.
Good. Yeah.
But it's a real pain when somebody leaves to find a replacement that fits. And as you know, it's not a matter of just having the chops to play your music. And some of our stuff has some weird time stuff when it comes to both bassist and drummer. We've got not much, but we've got some songs that may have measures that'll throw an extra beat in them here and there, and for some it takes longer to adjust to that, and for others they just say, oh yeah, that's neat, that kind of fits, and they pick up the rhythm right away. But it's not just having the chops, of course. It's being able to interact and get along with everybody and have no drama and just fun, and have the right attitude is equally or more important than the other things. And so we've got a band that's really good that way, and so it's fun.
That's
so how many people are currently in the band?
No, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
Yeah, how many people do you currently have in the band?
Well, it can change, because we've got some people who guest artists with it a fair amount. But right now we've got 8 people. We've had as many as 10, and we've had as many as 11 on stage for certain performances. We've rarely performed in the past with less than 6. But in terms of band members, there's myself, and then it started. I'd been in a previous band with some other people, Amanda. And she's in the center of that picture with the red flower dress, Amanda Moss, and Catherine LeBlanc next to her. We had been in a previous band called River Rhythm. And then when I was putting Free to Grow together, I called them up because we like to interact together and work together musically. And there was a third, Susan Thompson, who still sings with us, but she's currently living in Ottawa. She got a job with the federal government and moved there a couple of years ago. So Susan, she's still a part of the band, but she can rarely perform with us because she lives hundreds of kilometers away. James Rooney on the right has been our drummer relatively recently, and he came recommended by another friend, another local artist called Colin Fowley, and he had performed and recorded with Colin in his own band and with another band. And so Colin's been a great addition. Our drummer before him had been a university student who went home to Toronto. Joe Bonnell in the red shirt there, that's me on the left of the red shirt. The other red shirted guy, Joe Bonnell, he's originally from Burnt Church, New Brunswick, and Joe is a guitar virtuoso. So if you hear like really nice guitar on our tracks, it's because of Joe, not so much me. So I mostly stick to doing rhythm things and playing the acoustic and whatever weird tunings I might have for that particular song. And Joe has also got great skills as an arranger. So in both our vocal and instrumental arrangements, Joe plays a lead role in that. Larry LeBlanc, who's in the back left next to me in the black shirt, Larry LeBlanc's our bassist. He's been our bassist for a few years. So he's played with us when we've played shows in different parts of the province, like Bathurst or St. John or other places that we've played, Miramichi. Anyway, Larry is a great guy, and as I said, he's very patient with us because we may send him bass player memes, and he doesn't mind that at all. we've also got, and they're not in the picture, Sherry Chenard, and she sings on a couple of our new songs. So she's been a relatively new addition to the band. She hasn't had an opportunity to play with us, sing with us live. But Sherry has been in a number of bands in the Fredericton area for a long time, and she's a very talented vocalist. And so she, in our next album, will be singing lead on a couple songs as well as background vocals. And then we've got Josh Sangster, and he's with a band called Honeygut in Fredericton. And Josh has been singing with us. And he's a great vocalist and a great guy. He's also a paramedic, so he's one of these people who is continuing to work through this social isolation. So, and then we've got Catherine Mahler, who's a well-known fiddle player, violinist in Fredericton. She plays for New Brunswick Symphony, but she also has a solo act and is with a folk band called Different Folk. And Catherine has played on all our albums, and she's played cello and has played violin on them. So and she's played live with us on occasion, but her schedule's so busy as a full-time musician. Sometimes it's hard for her to find the time to be with us at a live show. So, but Catherine is certainly considered a member of the band, and we're lucky as punch to have her with us to add her skills for recording and for performing when she can do it. So I hope to God I haven't forgotten anybody, but you know, that's I'll hear about it. But and we did a song called Miracle Man, and it was for a friend of ours who had suffered a stroke a couple of years ago, and it was very severe, and he went to St. John, New Brunswick, and had a different, new kind of treatment where they put a kind of a stent up in his brain and to free the clot. And it was considered a miracle that he was alive. and so we wrote a song for him. And we had different guest musicians on that particular song too, which we drew from the community because everybody knows Bruce around Fredericton and around New Brunswick because he's a proud and vocal supporter of the live music scene in Fredericton. And he also plays in a band called The Unheard, which is a band that plays kind of hard rock, harder than we do. So we've got those influences that are a bit more acoustic and
Oh, that sounds
otherwise influence.
Excellent. So we got a couple of folks joining us here real quick before I give you a couple of more questions here. Jeff, we're going to say hello to Floyd Bueller, a good friend of mine, my lovely and wonderful wife, Jessica. I'm glad you could join us today. Levy, soon to be a dad, Suderman. I think they're about 7 months along in their pregnancy, so congrats there, Big Dad. And a former bandmate of mine before Mark and I even started playing, Trevor Hendry, playing together in the Screamin' Fleas. We played one show at the Royal Albert. No, it wasn't the Royal Albert, the Royal George, and that's it. Interesting story about that one, but that's for another show and another time. Okay, so Jeff,
one more thing.
There's a question.
Hang on a second, Ryan.
Sorry?
My turn. I'll just a shout out as well. Ronnie Taylor has joined us, Nicola Hunt, and Pauline Santoro, who's a regular. She says, love Saturday afternoons when you guys are on. So we love her, Pauline, when you join us. Anyhow, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for letting us be a part of your day today, everyone. And again, we'll give a shout out to anybody who's just joining us late. This is Jeff Patch from founder of the band Free to Grow. I almost got us in trouble there. A New Brunswick band. I almost said Nova Scotia, but I caught myself early.
Thank God.
To be fighting words there. So I am going to ask you a generalized question here, and maybe I'm way off base here. I was listening to your music obviously to prepare for this show, so I could be familiar with your stuff. And I do find it interesting that a lot of acts, regardless of the genre, end up having some kind of Celtic or Eastern Coast, East Coast feel to their music. Is it possible to even escape that if you're a band from the East Coast, or particularly if you're from New Brunswick? Now it's not bad at all. I love Celtic music. It's beautiful, and that sort of East Coast, it just weaves its way into it. Is it even possible to get away from that in the East Coast, or is that just mandatory?
No, it's not mandatory, and a number of bands do get by without that filtering in as an influence. And I think that, speaking as a principal songwriter, that it filters in what we do. Although I can't take sole credit for it, because everybody in the band plays a role in the final product as a song. So the different influences that have in vocal and instrumental arrangements, it can soak through. Yeah, so some of our songs, it's certainly in there, and we like it in there, and it'll probably never leave. Like if we do an album, there'll be definitely some Celtic influences that filter their way in. And there's a song coming in the next album that has that even stronger. It's a song I wrote about Celtic mythology and an Irish god called the Dagda. And so that'll be a new song, and that'll be real strong in there with both the fiddle and the rest of the arrangement in it. So yeah, it's there.
Yeah, great.
Can bands and do bands escape it from this area? Yes. Do we? Not fully, certainly not. It's there.
Well, and then that raises up another fundamental question. Okay, every once in a while it's good to change up your style, but if that were to leave, like if you tried an album and you just took a sidestep away from it just for one album, but then sort of returned to roots with the next one, if you decided to fully depart from that, would it still be Free to Grow if you were to pull away from that?
Well, that sends me down the thread of why are we called Free to Grow? And it has nothing to do with growing what used to be contraband. And free to grow conceptually means that we're free to grow in different musical directions. So we have songs that some would classify as moderately, they're definitely rock songs. We have songs that are progressive rock. We have songs that are folk, and a lot of songs that people, like genres and subgenres, would say that that's folk rock. And if you had a chance to listen fully to the 12 songs on our first album and the 14 songs on our second album, you'd see pieces of that throughout the album. And we consider that we're free to grow, as I said, musically. And if we have a bunch of songs that depart from a heavy East Coast or as heavy an East Coast influence, then I would say, yeah, we can do that. And we're free to grow there if we want to go there.
All right. Well, that's a great background of the rationale behind the band. I love that answer. That's great. So then I'm going to ask you an opinion here, because I like that idea of Free to Grow. It's always great to see a band progress musically over a number of years playing together. So if we use this example, I'm going to use two different examples for kind of bands from the same area. We're going to talk about Led Zeppelin. We're going to talk about AC/DC. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Led Zeppelin, from Led Zeppelin 1 all the way up through the Outdoor. Same band, same energy, different style, different things. There's similar sounds throughout and similar themes. Amazingly successful band. AC/DC, even Angus Young, when Back in Black was released, they said, hey, you just released an album that sounded like your last album. He says, that's incorrect. We just released an album that sounds like all our albums with that very unique AC/DC feel. What do you think? And I think you've already answered this, but let's give the definitive for this. What do you think is the better formula here? Is it the one sound with very small side steps here and there, or is it the ability to grow and change and morph over time?
Well, I think I might have mentioned that I did see Led Zeppelin in 1975, so that's part of the answer. I'm old enough to remember when back in the days you used to wait in anticipation for albums to come out from your favorite band, and they generally come out once a year. And I remember Led Zeppelin 1, and then Led Zeppelin 2 came out, and Led Zeppelin exploded with that. And so me and my friends, we all listened to 2, and then we discovered Led Zeppelin 1. We listened to 1 and 2. And we're all like, what are they going to come up with Led Zeppelin 3? And it came out with this part that was half acoustic and a very different sound. And it got panned by a lot of the critics when it first came out. But I absolutely loved it. And so, yes, I like that formula. And when bands do it, and they can pull it off like they obviously did, then that's something I would want to emulate. And as far as AC/DC, yeah, I like their stuff. I mean, I've got Back in Black that I play like whatever it is 60 million other people have. But by the same token, when I first heard AC/DC, I thought, oh, that's Slade, isn't it? And so I go back to that.
I've never heard that comparison for AC/DC before. That's great.
Well, that was my reaction back in the late 70s or whenever I first heard AC/DC. That to some degree they sounded to me like Slade, and with the same kind of gnarly voice lead singer and hard distorted electric guitars and not too complicated. And,
that's great.
Anyway, that's just my read on that.
Okay,
so, I would never knock AC/DC. I love them. A lot of my friends love them. But I would much rather emulate the Led Zeppelin formula.
Great answer.
So let's take a little bit of a music break. We've got a live performance of Free to Grow, a song called "Wash the Dishes." So give me a sec while I set this up. Oops. And okay, we should be good. Where is the? Nothing ever goes the way you want it to, particularly with my problems this morning.
It's okay. That gives us a second to say hello to Rodden Phillips, who has joined us. Rodden Phillips, thanks for joining us here. We got Jeff Patch from Free to Grow, and this is "Wash the Dishes." Is that the name of the song?
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Well, there we are. I see that was a long song because your hair has seemed to have grown, Jeff.
Yes. So I've morphed into Jeff Exotic now. Just to keep up with the times.
So what was
How
it?
y'all doing?
What was with the face paint? Were you trying to? Was that a Kiss tribute band there, or?
No, it was because it was a benefit for the SPCA, and so we had cat faces painted on painted on ourselves. Yeah, so it went with the theme of the show. So that made it fun. It's not something we've ever did before or do again.
Right.
Although I'd like to. It made for a fun show.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think I've ever done that, actually.
That's great. No, that was a great performance, a great tune. Just, I'm sure everyone was watching us kind of groove out while we were playing there. It was a really good, groovy and tight performance. Well done.
Well, that was, yeah, and that's more of a, that's a blues rock tune, and to me, it's kind of rootsy in it. But it's an interesting story behind that song. When I first retired, my wife still worked, and so when she came home, I had to do the dishes. She didn't want to come home to dirty dishes, so I had made these lists of chores incorporated in the song, just rake the lawn and whatever, sweep the floor, and that's all incorporated. Now, of course, I never did any of that stuff, or did it very well. But the concept that I had to do all the chores while she was working away, and but I just had to wash the dishes, because she won't be happy when she gets home if they don't. So that was the song. So it was just a kind of a joke that, like with a lot of songs, it depends on what you're thinking about, what you're going through. So that was a joke from start to finish, and that was on our first album. But when we did it on our first album, it's not nearly as dynamic, and we found that with a lot of our songs, they tend to evolve. And so that and how we've done it live since then it is quite different than how it was recorded almost 6 years ago now, and that's what makes it fun. So some of the songs that we recorded on our second album, which came out in 2018, were songs that we had played live for 2 or 3 years before we recorded them, and they were much better for it. And I found it interesting too to find that some of our heroes, like bands like Pink Floyd, often, of course, they didn't do an album every year. They often spread them out by a few years. But a lot of their songs that were put on albums were songs that they had floated and had in live performances for 2 or 3 years before they put them on albums like Animals and I Wish You Were Here. A lot of the songs on those albums were ones that they had played for several years before they recorded them, and I think it makes for a better product in the end. In fact, that's one we were thinking we may do a proper properly recorded live version of to put on an album sometime in the future, just because it's so much fun, because it's quirky and it's basic and it's yeah, makes you wanna move.
It'd be a good hidden track at the end of your last the one that was always 5 minutes after the last track of the album, right? You could put that as an extra hidden track on your next album. That would be a great one for your long-term fans, for sure.
Well, I remember when I bought the album Abbey Road, so I think that was 69, so I would have been 12, 13 years old, and I bought the album and I played it and I listened to it quite a bit. And then I read a review on it in Time magazine or somewhere, and it talked about the song, irreverent song at the end called, Her Majesty is a Pretty Nice Girl, which doesn't have a lot to say. And that's kind of at the end with a gap. And because I had the old kind of turntable that you had to put the needle on and then take it off at the end, and you didn't want the needle to go to the end and go clunk, 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 and the end of the song. So I had never heard that. And I thought, well, my record doesn't have that song that they're writing about. And it's because they're whatever that is. And it may just be a 10 or 15 second gap, or maybe even less. But it was enough time that I always pulled the needle off. And I never heard that song until after I read the review and I let the record play longer. So that's a neat trick that you can't do anymore. Except we're thinking of putting our next album out on vinyl. So yeah, maybe we'll sneak something in there. But that's no good if nobody ever hears it either.
But there's things like that. There was I've heard about bands who've released stuff in the 80s, and when vinyl was still a thing, like that was still it's sort of a heyday, and CDs were just starting to get a thing, and they actually had put in this was an old, really underground prog rock band that had actually hidden, because you could take audio signals and they would transfer into the computer, and so they actually wrote a computer program that if you had your turntable hooked up to your Commodore or whatever could receive it, and it would play after you played through the whole album, and then you hit record on your or listen and open up and listen to the audio file through your computer. It would actually create a program that you could run. It wasn't a very big program. It just said put the band's logo as best as it could be drawn in by the computer of those days. But it was there, and nobody found it for like 30 years until somebody decided, hey, I'm going to just do this for fun. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, now I'm going to check every one of my records to see if stuff was like that, right? So, which is not necessarily the case, but I think we all get the same.
Well, you could have a neat concept where you could write a hidden virus into your download. And since viruses are going around, it might be timely.
Yeah, maybe we'll just we'll skip that part of the interview there. While we got a second here, we'll say hello to Irina Longovia, Don Suarez, Audra Hildebrand, Brick Barrett, and Brandon Ofert, all joining us today online. Lots of people joining today. That's great. We have Jeff Patch from the band Free to Grow, a New Brunswick, local New Brunswick band, joining us today on the Invisible Man Show. So I was thinking and spitballing this while we were sort of while we were prepping for the show, sort of in the green room here, Jeff. I'm going to give you 3 different sets of bands, sort of in that classic rock era, and I want you to tell me which one you like better. Okay. All right, here we go.
I'm ready.
All right, Grand Funk Railroad, Fleetwood Mac. What do you like better?
Fleetwood Mac.
Atta boy. I love Fleetwood Mac. They're good. All right,
I'm an American band. I'm a Canadian band. Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
But I like I always like bands that have at least some element of a Brit influence. And anyway, go on.
All right.
And the fact that they mix acoustic with electric. So
yeah, exactly. Here we go. This is going to be a little bit different. These 2 Brit bands here, Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. What do you like better?
Oh my goodness, that's the worst one ever.
Oh,
I would
it's
have
gonna get worse, my friend.
well, the hardest to draw a favorite because to me they're on the exalted pedestal of greatness. And but I would go with Pink Floyd.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you gonna pick Roger Waters over Jimmy Page?
I'm going to pick David Gilmour.
Okay, fair enough.
Roger Waters, I'm not a fan of him personally. From all the stuff that I've read and interviews I've heard him talk at. But certainly the Pink Floyd music with the soundscapes they created, to me are great. But yeah, I would pick Pink Floyd, and also in terms of a writing influence, I'd like to think, or so on. You know, I'd want to sound more like Pink Floyd than I would Led Zeppelin.
All right, fair enough. All right, and I'm gonna leave the granddaddy of them all for you here. All right.
Oh, it's harder than the last one. Oh.
The Beatles or the Rolling Stones?
That's easy for me, and that's
Oh,
the Beatles.
It's the Beatles.
Right answer.
And I think because of the range of the songs they wrote, both when the band was together and also when they went on their solo journeys. But yeah, there's a broader range of stuff, and I love the Stones, and I always listen to them, and like I saw them when I was a kid, and that's hard. But I'd still pick Beatles because I like things that are more creative when it comes to a melodic element, and I think the Beatles were better at that.
Yeah, and if we're gonna bring it back down to that the comparison from before, where we were talking about Led Zeppelin and versus AC/DC, I think if you look at the Beatles versus the Rolling Stones, yeah, like they've got longevity and staying power, very samey, that bluesy rock kind of thing, which they did really, really well. But if you look at the Beatles, everything up until Help and then after Help just kind of took on a life of its own. Help for me is when the Beatles kind of went from a very pop sounding, maybe a few little things here, but then all of a sudden you start getting into new albums. And then of course what's often considered to be the first concept album of all time, Sgt. Pepper's, comes from the Beatles, right? So I can see how that would fit in with why you would pick that, because the conversation has always been about, and the theme of your band is free to grow and change and morph and become more, right? More than the sum of the parts, so to speak. So
yeah, and I'll give you another band, and they also put out a concept album in 1967 that I liked, and that was the Moody Blues and Days of Future Past. And I liked the Moody Blues albums after that, and they had a whole different vibe to them. But again, it's different than the Stones sound for sure.
For sure.
But you know, I people almost get in fights over that. You know, you don't like the Stones, and they can't stand the Beatles. To me, the Beatles got really good. I agree with you. With the album starting with Revolver and after, and their early poppy stuff, I don't listen to anymore. You know, I remember being a little kid and seeing kids on street corners jumping up and down, 5 years old, and going, "She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah." And you know, they had that and Love Me Do and whatever their super early hits. But to me, one of my favorite albums of all time is Abbey Road, and another one is Let It Be. And those were near the end of them and near their demise. But musically, the range in those albums is tremendous. And the musicality behind them is something that, let me put it this way, although I love the Stones. The Beatles could play what the Stones played, but the Stones couldn't have played what the Beatles played.
No.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I think that's definitely a fair assessment.
So, and I love the White Album and the Helter Skelter. Yeah, I go along with those that say that might be the first metal song. And when was that? 66? 60,
right around
68? Somewhere, anyway.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're getting close to the hour. I'd like that. Maybe if we can squeeze in another Free to Grow song, if we can.
Woohoo!
Yeah, let's. What I'd like to do, if it's okay, was that we've got actually a video of the making of OK Boomer, and then we'll listen to the whole song. If that sounds good.
Sounds wonderful.
So we're gonna set everything up here, and here we go. Let's see if I can get this to work.
Well, Joe's a handsome fella, so.
Yeah, we want Joe.
Yeah.
Just-
Okay, I need a drink now. Let's go.
That's the money one. That's the money one, Doug. That's the money
How does it
one.
look on video?
Looks pretty good. So yeah. So is there any story behind that song?
That's a friend who is the woman on the left, Brenda Malley. She's a local filmmaker with the New Brunswick Film Co-op, and she had a film called After the War that won some awards and also included music from local artists, including one of our other songs. And anyway, Brenda's been a friend for a long time, and she is working on a web series comedy that is highlighting the funny differences between millennials and boomers, and it's called OK Boomer. And so with this web series comedy, I asked if she needed a theme song, and she said sure. So we wrote that theme song, and those were cast members in the show who are singing on. So we have mostly female casts with some boomers and some millennials in their interactions, and hopefully it'll be a great web series and really funny, and
Nice.
people will like the theme song, which is OK Boomer.
Nice.
So it's kind of just a funny take on differences between millennials and boomers.
Well, we'll listen to the full song right away. Just wanted to say hi to Carla Bonnell has joined us, and she says, "Hey Jeff," and she's really excited.
Hey, Carla!
And she's really excited about having New Brunswick being represented. So we'll I can get this up and running. So OK Boomer, I've got a slideshow as well. So let's listen. There we go. That was excellent. That was I was dancing along. You guys couldn't see, but it was it's a lot of fun.
Well, that looks lovely. I appreciate you
Yeah.
finding and putting up our album and EP art and so on. That's
Yeah.
great.
Makes a more colourful show.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I got some contact information for Jeff and the band Free to Grow. So you can check that out. So freetogrowband.com. Also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and of course YouTube as well. So go check those out and say hi to Jeff and the band. So I think that's probably. Let me get back here. I think that's probably a good place to end. But now I would love to have you back on. I felt that we could have just carried on with this conversation for another hour. But
well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I very much appreciate it. And a shout out. You said Carla had joined, so Carla's been a great friend of the band, and we've shared the stage, and we love and appreciate her and her support.
Yeah, for sure. And Carla's actually going to be on the show next week. We'll be starting
Yay.
at 3 p.m. Central. Just a little schedule change there, just so I make it so Carla doesn't have to panic in the afternoon to make the start time. So a little later, but it'll be just as much fun. And Shaleem just actually joined us about 10 minutes ago. So hi, Shaleem. He's a regular. But if you tune in next week, Shaleem, you'll be right on time. Anyhow, so thanks a lot, Jeff. If you want to hang around, we'll just have chat after the show. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. The great turnouts, and we'll catch you all next week. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Holy and